Hey class, so for this exercise number 4, we're going to be creating a composition using type. Type is just like any object in Maya, and then we can add textures to it, add a camera, and render. So first I'm going to go to my Create menu and select Type. Type will, most of the parts that we're going to be changing are in the attribute editor, so you're going to click on it and go to your attribute editor on the right hand side here. Select through these different tabs, and the third one, type 1, is where you can change what the type actually says. So you can also check your different fonts, so definitely play around with something kind of fun and interesting and modern as well. Then I'm going to go down to the second section and actually change the letters of my type. I'm using a format of a typography assignment I had years ago in art school, so I know exactly the letters that I want to use to make this, but definitely just play around with some fun letters and shapes that you find interesting in composition. I'm also just playing around with my fonts. I do remember that I used Optima font a long time ago. Now I do want to look at some of the other settings we have for typography. So one is, you can see that this is being extruded a distance. I can change the bevel, so that's the edging around the ends of the model. There's a bunch of different options that will give you different looks. I kind of like this one a lot. It's got like a step effect. But you can also do kind of crisp cuts or more soft, rounded profiles. So if you'd like to use one of those, that would be great. And then when you click off of the model, you can see what it looks like, and then you can click back onto it. You can also change your extrude distance. We'll talk more about extrude in other lessons, but that's just the distance out. And you can also change whether it's regular or bold. Okay, so now that I've done that, the really important step is to go to Edit Mesh and Extract. Now that's going to turn all of my type into separate letters that I can click on individually. So Edit Mesh and Extract. Now I'm just going to speed this up quite a bit because I'm going to move, scale, and rotate all of my little pieces into place. So I do have an image that I'm working off of that you'll see later in this video that I use to color pick from. So the main thing is just to get some sort of interesting composition. Make sure your pieces are touching but not actually intersecting. If you're doing a piece like mine where I'm trying to have them like stacked on top of each other. If you're having a piece where they're flying in the air or what have you, then that's cool too. Remember, the lesson from last video was to make sure that you add a ground plane. So I'm going to do that. That will give, when we're doing the interactive photorealistic render, that'll give something for the light to bounce off of and bounce back onto my models. Now I'm going to create my shot camera, so that's Create Camera, and then double click it to rename it. And then go to your panels and look through that shot camera. So now you can press F there to focus on everything in your scene, or you can use your zoom tools to zoom out. Really important to turn on your resolution gate, and that will show you exactly where your camera is looking and what's going to be in frame and what's not going to be in frame. And I'm just making a few little adjustments to try and make this look a little cooler. I can also just zoom back because I'm trying to fit everything into frame. And that's starting to look a little better. Watch out with your ground plane. Sometimes having a corner in view is a good or bad design decision. So just make sure it's a choice rather than just something that's haphazard. Okay, so now that these are mostly placed well and I like the camera composition, I'm going to lock my camera. So now the shot camera is going to be held in place until I'm ready to actually to render with it. Now I'm going to add my textures. So for this 3, I'm going to right click, assign new material, and choose Lambert again. Remember, Lambert has no shininess, and that's a positive thing. And it's nice to work with at first. I'm going to make sure I'm renaming my texture. And then for my color, I'm actually going to color pick from an image from the original typography assignment. So I'm going to go to my front view, View, Image Plane, and Import Image. This is really important. I'm going to find my original typography assignment, and you can see I've kept it all these years. It's pretty funny. And from here, I can use the color picker to select from these different colors. So now I'm just going to move, scale, and rotate a little bit. One thing to know, your image plane is an object in your scene just like any other object, so you can move, scale, and rotate it as well. I'm just adding a bit of a background plane as well as the ground plane for light to bounce off of. So once I'm generally happy with this layout, I'm going to assign a new material to this ground plane. I think I already had. I'm going to click on the color picker and hover it over my image plane, and that will assign that color to that background texture that I created. So I'm going to click on my U. I'm going to assign a new material to it. So actually, before that, I'm just going to scale up this ground plane. It's really important to have nice big backgrounds that are kind of unobtrusive. So earlier I had created a texture for the number 3, so remember that's that Lambert. So double click on the color. Make sure you double click on it, otherwise you won't get this window. And now I can hover over and click on the number 3 when I like it. I can also make any adjustments to the color that I want here. So if potentially I wanted all of these materials for the letters to be the same hue but different saturations, I could change that too. So next I'm going to go to my and symbol, assign a new material for that. Lambert, make sure I change the name for it. Double click on the color box, click on the magic wand, and click when you're over the color that you want. And again, here the hue is like 205. They're all very similar in hue. And then last one or second to last one, the U, right click, assign a new material, choose Lambert, rename it, change the color with the wands, and make sure you hit done. Now for my little O, same thing, right click, assign a new material, Lambert, double click, use the wands. This one's a little tricky because it's so small. Click when you're happy, hit done. And then the image plane itself is just that object, so I could move it off so it's out of camera view. And now I'm basically ready to see how it looks in my shot camera. So it's looking pretty good. I'm happy. I wouldn't mind changing the color on the and, so I can do that here. So right click, assign an existing material. And for this one, I want to change it to that U color, I think. There we go. And then the U I'm going to change to the and, I think. Assign an existing material. And there we go. That's better. I do notice that my ground plane is a little crooked at this point, so I'm going to make a little bit of adjustment. One more trick if you're having problems with where the pivot point is, so the point where your object is moving from, or where your cursor is for your move tool, you can click that center pivot button. That will help as well. Alright, so now just a couple more things before I render. I'm just going to unlock my camera, make an adjustment on this view, and then lock it again when I'm happy with what it looks like. There we go. And now I'm ready to do my render settings. So remember, it's this tiny little IPR button. And I hit IPR and my screen is black. Uh-oh. So that means that I have not added a light yet. So that's super simple to do. We're just going to go to the Arnold menu and add our first light. So Arnold's, lights, and skydome. And click on that. And you can change your settings for your skydome. Intensity is the one that I changed the most. And just so you can see what the skydome actually looks like, if you scroll back, it looks like a big dome that's wrapped around your model. So now if I click the IPR button again, I'm getting a nice start to my render. You can see that I'm in the wrong camera though. I'm in my perspective camera. So if that happens to you, just change to your perspective and your shot camera. Okay, so a couple more things. Yeah, just make sure you're in the right camera. Make sure your render settings are good. So I'm going to go to File, Save Image in the option box. Make sure Color Managed is checked. And then go to this Render Settings button. So in the Common tab, remember that we need to change our image format to JPEG. Change our renderable camera to our shotcam, and change our image size. I'm going to do HD 1080, but you could do whatever makes sense with your composition. Under the Arnold renderer, I know I don't have anything shiny or something with transmission in it in the scene, so I'm going to turn those off by turning them to 0 and enable the adaptive sampling. Then render, and choose my shotcam. I'm going to speed this up a whole bunch. It did take about 12 minutes on my computer, I think. This is sped up times 8. But you can see Maya's going to just process this one image. It's worth noting that if you're going to render an animation, you need to change one more setting so that each frame of your animation has its own number behind it. So that way you can string it together later. And I'll show that in our animation videos. So the last thing to remember once it is done is that you should make sure you go to File and save your image. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.